Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Tristan and today we are going to be talking about how much money I save annually by driving a Toyota Prius. Now if you don't know, a Toyota Prius is a hybrid car. Hybrid cars you actually don't plug in and they strictly run off of gas, while also having that electric component where the car actually self-charges to make it run a little bit more efficient while using gas. Things like braking helps the car charge a little bit better and helps you get better gas mileage. And if you enjoy this video, go ahead and give it a like and also hit that subscribe button for more content. Now let's go ahead and hop into it. And the first thing that I want to talk about is how much money you actually save on gas by driving a Prius. Now the average 5-seater car in the United States gets about 26 miles per gallon. And if you compare that to some of the Toyota Prius models, they actually get 56 miles per gallon. However, I actually drive a 2010 Toyota Prius hybrid, and my Prius on average has gotten about 48 miles per gallon. Now that car is about 10 years old, so the newer ones are probably a little bit better. However, I noticed that my Prius actually says it can get 52 miles per gallon, but with the way I drive it, which isn't super reckless or anything like that, I don't accelerate on the gas pedal a ton, but I don't drive as conservative as possible, and so I'm sure that those numbers that they post online of the highest miles per gallon it can get are probably if you're driving the most conservative and probably accelerating a little bit slower and things like that. And so from what I've seen and from what I look at my speedometer, it actually tells me that I get on average about 48 miles per gallon. Now one thing I want to talk about is how much I drive my car, just so that you can get an idea of what to kind of compare this to. I would say before the pandemic and before we started working from home and things like that, I probably drove roughly about 300 miles per week. Now that was about to and from work, so I work about 26 miles away from where I live. Most of that is freeway driving, so it takes me about 25-30 minutes to get to work. And on top of that, we would usually drive up to my wife's parents' house or to the grocery store or to the gym, things like that a few times a week or every other week or things like that. And so on average, with the weekly commute being about 250 miles there and back 5 times a week, I added on an extra 50 miles just for regular things that I do throughout the week. Now with that 300 miles of driving and getting about 48 miles per gallon, that takes about 6.25 gallons of gas per week for me to drive my car. And on average, I live in Utah, so the average gas price is about $2.37 per gallon. And that ends up costing me about $15.04 to drive my car every week, compared to $27.34 if I drove a car that got on average a 26 miles per gallon. And that's a savings of about $12.30 a week, or $639.60 every year just on gas. Now one thing that's really cool is a Toyota Prius isn't actually that much more expensive than a lot of other cars, and so this gas savings, especially if you keep this car for a long time, really does add up and can almost pay for the car itself. And a little bit later in this video, I'll get to how much I actually paid for my car. I bought it used, but we'll go ahead and talk about that. I want to continue on the gas price, and I want to talk about things outside of your ordinary driving, outside of the ordinary just going to work, going to the grocery store, things like that. And I want to talk about using the Prius on road trips. Now we live in Utah and we go on road trips pretty frequently. It's a little bit different than maybe if you're living on the East Coast. We sometimes will go out to California or to Las Vegas or St. George, or even up north. Sometimes we'll go to like Wyoming or Idaho. And usually if we go to St. George or Vegas or Idaho and Wyoming, it's about anywhere between 400 to 700 miles away. However, if we're going out to California, usually we go to San Diego or LA, it will be up to about 1,800 miles round trip. Now if we take that same gas price, and that is being a little conservative because when you're going on road trips, usually in the middle of nowhere, gas prices are a little bit more expensive, and especially if we're going out to California, their gas prices are a lot more than they are here in Utah. However, we'll still use that $2.37 gas price that we pay here in Utah. And if we're taking an 1,800 mile road trip there and back to California, it's gonna save us about $75 on that road trip. Now again, if we're gonna go somewhere a little bit closer, maybe it's a 700 mile road trip or something along the lines of that, we're gonna be saving about $29.35 on that road trip. And so overall, we take about 2 road trips a year, usually one longer one and one shorter one, or maybe 2 shorter ones. But that saves us an additional about $100 a year just on when we go on road trips by saving in gas prices. Now, not only do you save money on gas prices, it's also a lot more eco-friendly. if you think about it, you're using about half as much gas, a little bit less than half, but half as much gas every time you drive. And if you're eco-conscious or you want to be a little more eco-friendly, it's definitely a great added benefit that isn't directly related to cost. Now, it's definitely not as good as driving a fully electric car, and believe me, I wish I had a Tesla that I could drive, maybe one day, but it's still better than nothing. And it definitely does help minimize your carbon footprint that you're making on this earth. Now, I actually want to bring my computer in front of me because I looked up some things on kind of the average repair costs for cars versus the Prius, and I want to bring up some of those ideas. That way you can get kind of an idea of how much you're going to be spending per year on your car outside of things like insurance and gas. Now, when I go to Google and I look up the average repair cost for cars on average, it says it costs about $1,186, and that includes things like regular maintenance, so tires, oil change, brake checks, things like that, your rotations, all those sort of things that are kind of standard, plus the additional things that may need just fixing based upon the car's wear and tear. Now that seems a bit high for me. I've never owned a car where I had to pay that much on it. However, I haven't had a car that's more than 10 years old really, and so maybe after that point things really start to add up. However, I googled the average for a Toyota Prius, and what that gave us was $408. And with mine, I actually haven't even had to do anything close to that. I haven't had any problems with my car other than changing tires, getting the oil change, filters, which I actually do myself. They're super easy. If you don't know how to do that, Google it. You'll save 20 bucks super easily. But really, I haven't had any problems with my Prius. The only time I've had to do a major repair on my Prius is actually when another driver hit me. It hit the front of my car and kind of messed the whole thing up, and it was thousands of dollars in repairs. But other than that, I haven't had any major repairs on my Prius, and even after that happened, which was like 2 or 3 years ago, nothing has gone wrong with it since then. Now, a brand new Toyota Prius probably costs you around $24,000, depending upon which model and you get and whatnot. However, my parents actually bought the car that I'm driving today, 1 or 2 years old with about 14,000 miles on it for $18,000. So that was $6,000 less. And as always, if you're ever buying a car, buy it a couple years old, because those first couple years, and the old saying goes, when you drive it off the lot, it loses a lot of value, and that's totally true. The car that my parents bought was actually from a car rental company, so it was used as a rental for a couple years, and then they bought it from them. Luckily, it was a no smoking car, so we don't have a terrible smoke smell or anything like that. But my parents bought that car and they drove it for about 3 to 4 years. Now, after those 3 to 4 years, I actually bought that car from my parents for about $10,000. Now, at this point, it was about 6 years old and it had 80,000 miles on it. Luckily, I got a great deal. They were my parents. They gave me a break. However, Toyota Priuses at about that age and those amount of miles on it roughly do go for about $10,000 to $12,000, depending upon how old they are and things like that. Now, I've been driving that car for about 5 years now, coming up on, I guess, year 6. But really, I've saved about $3,000 just in commuter gas to and from work by driving that car, and overall, probably about $4,000 when you factor in things like road trips and kind of extra driving that I do. And that's just my 5 years alone. That's not how much my parents saved, that's not how much has been saved over the life of the car, but really, on average, you save about $700 to $800 a year by driving that car, and with it being 10 years old, that's about $8,000 within those 10 years. On top of that, that actually doesn't even factor in those decreased repair costs. And so if you factor that in, it's gonna be in a few hundred more dollars, a few thousand every 10 years. And really, that could be about $10,000 within the first 10 years just by driving a Prius over an average 5-seater car in the United States. And especially if you don't buy your car brand new, when you factor in your savings on top of the cost of the car, it actually makes it so you're essentially driving a car for free, because right now where my car is, I could probably sell it for $5,000 to $6,000 and essentially be paying maybe $1,000 on the lifespan of my car to actually drive it, or even less than that. Now, you may have heard a lot of things about driving a Prius, some of the pros and some of the cons, but I just wanted to go over a few that I noticed and kind of give you a little idea of why I love my car, or some things that I don't like about it that I wish could change. Now, of course, we've already talked about it, but the great gas mileage is always a huge plus. Another thing with me living in Utah is it snows a ton, and there are actually some pretty bad snowstorms here. And driving a Prius, some people may think, oh, it's a hybrid car, it may not do that well in the snow. However, a Prius is actually a front-wheel drive car, and so it has pretty good traction, especially if you get all-terrain tires or snow tires. Now, it is a very light car, so sometimes it will slide, and you do have to be careful while you're driving, but unless you're driving up a super steep hill, it'll pretty much be able to do everything you need it to do in the snow. Just don't be dumb while you're driving. I remember one Christmas morning, there were probably like 5 or 6 inches of snow on the road, and my Prius drove about 15 miles from my apartment to my parents' house totally fine. There were some times when I was in the neighborhood and it would slide a bit, but of course you drive slower in the snow, and so it's able to account for things like that, and you're not going to go spinning out of control or get stuck. A couple more added benefits, and some people kind of complain about this one, but it's being super quiet. I actually love that my car is super quiet. I hate the sound of an engine running while I'm driving my car. Whenever I get in my wife's car, I'm always like, oh, I forget how loud a car actually is. But it's super nice having it being super quiet. Some people do complain about that, however, because you don't know if a Prius is coming. One thing that I always make sure to do is if I am driving and I see pedestrians walking on the road or riding their bike or things like that, I always make sure to give them a little extra space. That way they don't get worried or see me super close to them or anything like that. The other thing about a Prius that's actually super amazing that I never really appreciated before was how good of a turn radius that it has. I can pretty much turn into any parking spot, around any corner, into any garage or anything like that without having to do a 3 or 4 point turn. I kind of imagine it like the car is here and then there's like a little point in the middle that it just like rotates around. And so really you can get out of some super tight spaces, and it's so nice being able to parallel park. I always talk about it. My sister's actually turning 17 soon. She's gonna get her driver's license soon, and I'm telling her, hey, you should use my car when you take a driver's test because it turns so easily. Now, a couple things on the negative side of driving a Prius, and these aren't all by any means super bad, and these are just kind of negatives to me. Some people may also see these as a positive. And the first thing is that the car is super low to the ground. I have definitely bottomed out a few times. They're actually like that little protection thing on the bottom of your car. Mine completely ripped off one time when I was driving. Just over time it kept kind of wearing on the ground, and then eventually it just came off, and so I had to pull that off completely. But it is actually super low to the ground and makes it so that it's kind of hard to go over things like speed bumps or ever off-roading. Now, it's not like it's gonna scrape every single time. After a while of driving it, you get used to it. I haven't scraped it in years. Go over speed bumps all the time, go uphill, go downhill. You just gotta be careful, especially when you're going into driveways or underground parking garages or things like that. The other thing is you kind of have to get used to seeing out of the back. It is a hatchback car, and so there's kind of 2 windows on the back side. One that goes straight across and then one that's kind of at a slant with a bar in the middle. And so you do kind of have to be a little careful and just get used to seeing out of the back and the different windows, especially when you're doing things like head checking. You know, you turn over your shoulder, and it's sometimes kind of a little bit different to see out, especially because you're super low to the ground, and just the way that the car is made. That's definitely something you'll want to try to test drive when you are driving the car. Be aware of those things because they do take a little bit to get used to. However, after a while, you're totally fine. And just like the other 2 complaints, the last one that I have is how touchy the brakes are. Every time someone drives my car, they're always like, whoa, because they don't expect the brakes to be that touchy and the gas to be that kind of slow at accelerating. It doesn't accelerate super fast just right off the bat, and so like if you're turning onto a main road, you may want to give yourself a little bit extra time. However, once you're going, it does pick up speed pretty quickly, and it does really well in that case. As far as the brakes go, they are super touchy. There's not really any give to them. So when you start braking, don't just kind of slam on those brakes. Go pretty slow and you'll come to a complete stop. No problems at all. Again, just another one of those things that you have to get used to that's different than driving most cars. But there we go. I hope I gave you a good idea of what it's like to drive a Prius, maybe some of the pros and some of the cons, and really how much money that you can actually save by driving a Prius. Again, it's not a fully electric car, so you do still have to fill it up in gas. You don't plug it in, but you can save quite a bit of money just on your daily commute and things like that. And if you made it to the end, I just want to say thank you for watching it all the way through. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe for more videos. And again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.